Okay, because we are live now. This is a UFO slash UAP interview with all the way from Australia, Dr. Andrew Morgan, who is a researcher based in Western Australia. He holds a PhD and is actively involved in studying unidentified anomalous phenomena. Okay, but when you say experiencer, I know you're talking about very scientific stuff and some stuff about maybe how the crafts work. Could you be in a little bit more detail of what you mean by experiencer? Is this witnessing craft, or have you actually had some type of direct interaction?
So it's a bit of both. So I have seen craft. When I was in the Pilbara, I saw several. One was very odd. I was cycling home one day after work along the street, and it's very unusual when you see craft because everyone says, "Oh, I forgot to film it." You kind of get in this it's like a trance-like state where everything seems to momentarily you become distracted because I saw an object move across the sky during the day. It had no ailerons, no wings, no plume, no exhaust, no sound, and it just quietly um, moved across the sky, blue sky background in an arc. It looked like a cone with a cylinder with a cone on it with a little black a trail off the back of it, but no sound. And there were no wings or anything, so it looked nothing like a helicopter or an aeroplane. Another time was night time. I saw in the distance on the horizon when I was out at night just observing another object which had a very unusual light pattern that you wouldn't see. There was a row of red over a row of white lights in the distance between a couple of mine sites. And there was I can't remember if there was another one. The other direct experience is in the field of orbs. A lot of orbs up there. I was researching orbs and filming them in infrared. So I had a site that I was going to regularly that I was able to film lots of orbs, and we're publishing on that. And on my YouTube channel, there's quite a lot of information about researching orbs and our imaging analysis on what they are and the mechanics of them. Because a lot of this is looking at back engineering, or how do we make a craft or a technology that copies the behaviors and dynamics of some of these phenomena that we see that seem to defy physics. So that's one side of being an experiencer. The other side is my personal interactions, especially in the Pilbara, but even recently, because I document all this in a spreadsheet. There's a colleague I've got that's helped me classify and document this in a scientific way, my own personal experiences with what goes on at night in my room when I have these interactions with I suppose you could have beings, figures, or entities hijacking consciousness and being taken somewhere. I've been taken into metallic rooms, or not physically, my consciousness, because it seems to be nowadays a lot more to do with interaction between your consciousness and a being taken somewhere, more than what you heard decades ago about physical abductions or abduction phenomenology. There seems to have been a shift, and you can hear people talk about that on the internet when they talk about interactions with entities or beings now as well. So consciousness, I call it being hijacked and taken somewhere. So whether that's a metallic room, one I had where I was in walking what I thought was between a row of pallets along a wall, and I always remember these things now. I've got very good at it, overcoming fear-based responses. So I was walking along what I thought was a wall and pallets, and then once I was aware that I was doing that, it actually changed into a round metallic room with a low green sort of luminescence to it, with three walls and what you'd call one of those beds or med beds, and I was sitting on it and went over and sat on it, and these short entities came out to me and started talking, because I've got used to interacting a lot more now, and then I felt restrained after that, and a tall, sort of older white figure came in and seemed to be in charge, and these other shorter ones all backed off. And then that's when I felt the sort of restraint on me sort of forcibly made to lie back, and something was starting to be done to me. And I'm much better at struggling and with all that and questioning and asking why now, because when I first got into all this and these similar types of experiences that happened in a number of different situations involving metallic rooms over a number of years. At first, it was trying to fight it and being afraid, and then it was more thinking about it. I was very conscious of what was going on during the day and reflecting on it, going, well, what am I afraid of? What am I actually? What's the fear of? So I need to be in these things and not be so afraid, and start to challenge them and ask what is being done or what is being said. And that was over a number of years, until I got to a point where, when I was in these situations, whoever or whatever was there was starting to say that I'm not meant to be able to do that. Another one was similar, where I was, because they can get into your dreams as well, whoever or whatever they are. I was in a dream where I was hiking in a mountain, quite an enjoyable one, and walking along the side of a cliff which changed into an entryway, and I found myself horizontally floating, unable to moved into another dark metallic room, and put semi-upright on a dais with my arms in a certain position. And then I could hear this talking going on but not see anything. And then I moved my arms and I posed the question and say, how do you want me, like this or this? And I heard something or someone say, you're not meant to be able to do that. And then I was ejected out of there pretty quick. So it's those sort of things going on now. The latest one was in my room, in my room, because I'm conscious, like physically asleep, but I'm brain consciously wide awake. So this latest one was very humanoid, forms almost human or augmented humans. So I was pulled up out of my bed, had my hand, something put around my hands, and guided or led through a situation in my room, which just seemed to turn into this big causeway. I couldn't see what was going on, but there was a lot of activity around me. There seemed to be a lot of people or figures moving around. And we went right to the end of this causeway into this other room with rings in it, some sort of transportation room, and there were 3 people with me, and we were ported to a daytime situation in a big old house somewhere else, which looked like we're on Earth. And briefly there with these three human figures, and I was asking them questions about where we are and what we're doing, and they don't seem to like you. Whatever goes on, you're allowed to observe, but if you start asking too many questions, whoever or whatever this is, they don't like it, and after a while they send you back. So it's all that's the personal experiences side, the craft side, and the research side. So it's pretty interesting stuff. And I write all this down on spreadsheets and analyze it, and I have a couple of key people that can't be named that I talk to about all this, and we try and sort of put them in different categories of experience to look for trends and a way to quantify and analyze what's going on in terms of multi-dimensional space and time and cognition and consciousness and symbols. We look for symbolism, not only figures, but we look for symbols and symbolisms, reactions, objects you can see in these situations or rooms. So it's quite an interesting subject if you take it seriously and don't just pass it off and shrug it off.
Yes, because I've been studying this for about 11 or...
It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. It has.
So can you explain the difference? You say that some of these are dreams and some of these you think it's kind of like an out-of-body experience. How do you know the difference? And is this your choice? Because I've had the dreams with them quite regularly, but I don't, sometimes they seem so realistic that I wonder after if they were real or not. Just how do you differentiate if it's a dream or if it's an outer body experience?
You can tell. So everyone has normal dream processing, right? Where there's a bunch of stuff that you've had during your day or over the last week, and it all gets mushed together, and you may or may not remember them. Some people don't remember their dreams at all, but I can remember those sort of mishmash dreams as well. And you just pass them off. Like I don't record them or anything. So, but it's the ones where you start to differentiate between, like you said, out of body experiences, bilocational precognition, what you'd call being taken, or the hijacking of your consciousness and being taken into a situation. So it depends how they start, I think, because I can have like I said, the ones where you're being taken, where I was having a dream, and they're adventure dreams, like I'm out off in the wilderness doing something, and then that turns into being taken somewhere. So that would be I call that the hijacking of your consciousness, and you're taken to, it's the whole metallic room situation. They're well differentiated. The beings involved in the situation might be slightly different in terms of surroundings, but that's one type of scenario. Out of body is a little different because they're flying dreams, and your consciousness of being in a landscape or a situation where you're flying. All right, and I've had those my whole life, flying dreams, right from when I was a child. Sometimes I'd felt like someone was accompanying me, and sometimes it's just by myself. And those are out of body ones. Now, the way that started and really took off was, again, analyzing myself and going, and the enthusiasm, how do I get into these things voluntarily, and can you get into them voluntarily? And I think there is a way, and it's to do with that dropping feeling. Now they say when you feel like you're dropping or falling, and you're asleep and you get sleep paralysis, and you think, well, if you get to the bottom, you're going to die. None of that's true, because when you get to the bottom of falling is when you leave your body. It's a process of entry. It's a gate, okay. And if you overcome the fear of that falling, you'll soon realize that when you stop falling, you're actually out of your body. So I got better and better and better at doing that. It's not voluntary yet, but if I do realize I'm going into it, I do have some control over it now. I can stay on these things for quite a while. So they're the flying ones, which are out of body. Bilocation is very interesting. Now, the way I figured out bilocation was because when I'd come out of them, I was in two places at once. That was one really weird one where, and bilocation and precognition seemed to be a little bit mixed up, because there was one where I was on some sort of research campus in a situation that had evolved, and I somehow ended up lying on the ground or looking up at this huge circular object that was rotating, because at first I thought it was stars, but it was actually a whole lot of bunch of lights under a huge craft. And I woke out of that in my bed, and it was really bizarre because I went into overdrive because my eyes were fluttering, because I could see two places at once. I could see the end of this vision, because I call them visions when they're like that, but I could also see the room I was in as I was waking up, both at the same time. And I really freaked out because how can I be in two places at once? So my brain went wild about that, and I thought about it for a long time. But it's all, like my colleagues say, this is a lifetime of training. They seem to think, when we document all this and look at trends and analyze it, that you've been trained in all this your whole life to understand space and time in ways other people, or not many people, understand, so that you become comfortable with it. And they say, well, what's that in preparation for? What the hell is the purpose of it? Or we don't know, but there seemed to be some preparation. With everything going on in the world at the moment, you've got to wonder whether there's a whole bunch of us around the world that have been doing this our whole lives that are going to be put to good use at some point. So that's out of body, precognition or bilocation, the being taken or the hijacking of consciousness. So they all have certain situations that that trigger them. All right, and once you become familiar with them and overcome all the fear of being involved in all this, and seek to understand it and assert yourself within that situation as having some control, these all evolve into levels and complexity above that, because you're seen as being comfortable with it, so you're given more challenges, is the way it seems to work. So yeah, I would encourage people to, and also there's your mind is very powerful, so you have to understand that your brain can convince you about what things are, rather than being the truth. So if you're a fundamentalist Christian, then all of this is going to be possession, demons, and angels. All right. So if you're a siloed physicist, for example, then none of this is possible and can't exist, because you're only interested in the physicality of existence. So if you're a shaman or a spiritual person, then this is all quite normal. We've got to get used to the fact that you construct the reality you live in, all right, and that defines your surroundings and how you interact with the physical world. So if that's what governs your reaction or your response to the situations around you, physically or otherwise, then you're only ever going to see what you want to see. All right. So it's stepping away from all that, and just being human and saying that all these things are happening to me, I want to know why, rather than say, no, it can't exist, not possible, doesn't happen, I'm scared shitless, I'm afraid of it. If I see any of these guys, I'm going to get a shotgun and shoot them all. Then that's all you'll ever have, and that's what will be reflected back at you your whole life. So you'll be none the wiser.
So what makes you what makes you think these are aliens and not ghosts or other type of spirits entering your dreams? Are they telling you this in the dreams, or could you explain that part?
Yeah, that's an interesting. People have asked me that too, about the spirit world and the overlap with spirituality, and people that have passed on. And all. I've had ancestor experiences in my life as well, that have come to me. So that's quite easily differentiated from the whole passed over side of the phenomenon in the spirit world. And I'm convinced, as a science to all this, there's a whole level of dimensions that we're unfamiliar with, where things happen and where we go, or others go, and I think it's universal. So how do you tell the difference between visitations and on that side of things? Because I was brought up a Christian as well, so an understanding of some of these things in terms of the biblical or Christian narrative too. But in terms of intelligences or non-human intelligence, I mean, even the Vatican observatories come out now and said, well, if there are other civilizations in the universe, we're all children of God in one form or another. So you can't say that Christian religion is not rejecting this as demonic, because the Catholic Church is not saying that anymore. They're saying if we're in a populated universe, then we're all the children of God. So how do you differentiate it? Well, it's pretty obvious, because when these visitations happen, they have a very humanoid form. It must be a universal formula or something for bipedal motion, just not quite like us. So larger eyes, larger heads, skinnier bodies, different color, up to augmented or hybrid humans that look very, very much like us, but uniformed as well. So a lot of there's always a theme to these that seems to differentiate it too. So, and a lot of this can be when you move into a multi-dimensional way of thinking. I was analysing some of the data and looking at how to interpret it. Is a lot of the humanoid entities or figures that come into this seem to be security type figures or guardian type figures of the situation that you're in. So guides, guardians, or security people, whether or not you're around other non-human entities as well. So it's easy. It seems to be easy to tell the difference. All right. Now there's also, I just saw some flashes come up about dreams and nightmares, or scary situations, or sleep paralysis, and having horrible nightmares and dreams. Now I think a lot of that's programming, because I simply don't seem to have those anymore. I used to have heaps of them growing up, but then I used to watch a lot of violent stuff. I'd watch horror movies. I'd watch a lot of violent TV and violent television shows, and now we've got social media. I would say that that's programming, because your mind is very powerful. So remember, you construct the reality you live in. So if you live in violence, then you're going to get violence in your life. So and nightmares and horrible things about what's being done to people in violent movies. So you could have nightmares about all that, because that's what you've invited into your life. All right. So you're projecting that out there. It's going to come back to you. So I don't seem to have those, not very often, in every now and then, but nothing like the frequency of what I used to do. And you need to train yourself out of that, because if you don't have the maturity of mind and consciousness to understand that those are programs and constructs, or the simulation, if you want to call it, that we live in, and you've got to step out of that. As a young developing mind, you can't do that. Okay, so that becomes your reality: violence, aggression, what we see going on around the world now with some of the, people have lost their way. Right? They're all asleep and just reacting to what's going on around them. So yeah, so it's I find it easy to differentiate as an experiencer those situations when they happen to me.
So, what have you learned from these experiences and taking notes? Is there anything you can apply, or what have you learned about the nature of reality from these dreams?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What have I learned about the nature of reality? Nothing's what it seems. All right. If you go back to antiquity, you can see pre-modern civilization. So you're going back more than sort of 300 years, and then back thousands of years. If you go back to antiquity, to ancient Rome, and then back even further, it seems that there's more and more evidence coming out that we were much more highly advanced in terms of civilization, consciousness, and spirituality back then than we are now, and that there seems to be evidence coming out that there was a non-human presence that had something to do with human development, 12,000 or more years ago, even up to sort of 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. So that seems to be, if you seek to understand where we've come from and where we're going, your world changes, and you see the situation we're in now. And I think it is going to get more and more chaotic. What have I learned about myself and all this is being positive about the chaos around the world, and there is a purpose to everything that's going on at the moment, with the violence and the destruction and the separation of people moving forward that want peace. And people stuck in karma, I would say, is overcoming karma. I mean, a lot of this stuff that's going on around the world is generational karma, and just recycling hate and violence. Because you're not in your ethnicity, you're not the person that was around 100 years ago or 50 years ago that was subjected to, or the perpetrator of all that aggression, violence, and hate. You're a human being. You're your own person, So, but you're placing historical circumstances onto your current situation, and then just perpetuating that hate and violence as the receiver or the perpetrator. So all these dumb people protesting at the moment, they're stuck in a constructed reality. They're stuck in the simulation. They're just receiving and giving or repeating karmic cycles. So they're just going to know violence, death, hate, and destruction, unless they say, right, this is just generational trauma. I'm going to step away from all that. It's not me. It's not who I am, irrespective of what religion you are. And that's where we're at the moment. A whole lot of people are going to die. A whole lot of people are going to end up nowhere. So what have I learned? Is that nothing is what it seems. We're in a world that's become how it is because that's what certain people have wanted it to be. Interest and credit-based economy, a hydrocarbon, fossil fuel-based economy. These have all been constructed for us because people have been none the wiser, and the increasingly dumbing down of society to being largely illiterate and not wanting to read makes it very easy to manipulate entire populations of people into believing whatever you want. Eat this food, it's good for you. Well, actually, no, it's not. It's going to make you dependent on the health system. Oh, good, then we can give you drugs to help you with your ill health. We don't want to heal you. We just want to keep you sick and make money out of you. And that's where we're at. Literally, that is where we're at. Your body is a commodity to make money out of, and we don't want you healthy. We want you sick and reliant on hospitals, drugs, pharmaceuticals, all that sort of stuff. So that's just where we're at. That's why society is crumbling and falling apart, and there's all this chaos and war and violence around the world because everyone's waking up and going, "You've been feeding us a load of crap for 50 years, and this is where we're at now." And people are going, "We want to be healthy and peaceful. We want a civilization that can go off the planet, interact with whoever else is out there in a positive way." So all this experience of my whole life makes me sit there and want to help. I'm an educator as well, help people get transition across to healing yourself, stepping out of karma and generational trauma, understanding that right now in this situation where you are now, yes, you're in a physical world, but that physical world's been constructed for you. Reconnect with spirit, understand consciousnness is key, and that you are more than just a body with a brain that's at the beck and call of things that are happening around you that are all about making money. And so it's trying to step away from that and being programmed through social media. Our youth are in a terrible situation at the moment because they think they know everything and they're fed algorithms, and their algorithms show them more and more of what they want to see, which is mostly rubbish. And so they're increasingly ignorant of how to cope or orientate themselves in a world that's changing, and they're just easily manipulated. So as an educator, I find that very problematic and difficult to overcome. So these are all, what have I learned about all this as a person of consciousness and interaction with the non-physical world, is that there's a whole universe out there waiting for us, and we're teetering on that now. And I'd say getting ready. And if you follow the hearings in the US with the UAP, if you follow the increasing focus of academia on the various aspects of UAP and non-human intelligence, you'll see that we're teetering on rolling this out or peeling back the layers and trying to get society to understand that we're coming out of a situation we've been in for decades. A certain sector of society has been quietly chipping away at this. So the military-industrial complex, for example, and a select group of people, for various reasons, nefarious or otherwise, have known a lot about all of what I've talked about and been looking at and researching it in terms of adversarial technology for a long, long time now, and development of or weaponization of all that, from consciousness to the brain to the mind to physical hardware. This has all been going on quietly in the background for, as they say, the legacy programs for the last 70 or 80 years. So we've got two worlds colliding at the moment in terms of all this. And it's the likes of us trying to educate people. And it's not about retribution. I mean, if you want to be a peaceful society, we're not on a witch hunt, are we? If you can get over your karmic cycles, but you're not going to go and sit there afterwards and point the finger at some of these aerospace companies and say, oh, he needs to go to jail, she needs to be fired, and they need to have their company dismantled. And that's not what it's about. It's about First Nations approaches is about reconciliation and truth telling. So that's what I've learned as a person that wants to share my experiences and all this as well. I mean, I've jumped across a whole lot of subjects there, but I'm trying to give you an idea of how my perception of reality in the world around me has changed over many years, getting into my older adult years and looking into and trying to understand all this, and then sharing that through rigorous empirical research in the field on UAP, through writing and talking about my life as an experiencer, and showing how this changes my understanding of the world around me as well. And surely that's only got to be helpful.
Someone wanted me to ask you, what is your precise boundary between speculative physics and legitimate science, and how you personally decide when an idea has crossed from imaginative modeling into something that deserves engineering attention?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because if you go to my ResearchGate EnergyScapes lab page, that's where all our technical documentation is, and that's based on evidence, right? So theories and concepts, for example, back engineering a craft that copies the behaviors of some of the things we've seen is a lot of scientific research, and people need to understand that science isn't fixed. It's not like we've solved the problem, E equals mc squared, and Einstein never intended that to be the case. And there's science has fallen down this hole of we've solved everything. So there's got to be a methodology to gather evidence that shows patterns and trends, whether that's as an experiencer or gathering field-based information on UAP observations. It's when I've started analysing the data, and I've started to see some common patterns and trends on UAP or experiencer phenomena, and then going, okay, we've got a pattern or a trend here. Next thing is, have we got the vocabulary to explain or interpret the analysis? Now that's a big one, because we are submitting peer-reviewed papers on all of this as we've moved into methods. So you've got to have a methodology, you've got to have data that shows a pattern when you analyze it, qualitatively or quantitatively. Then you've got to have a vocabulary to interpret and understand it, and then you've got to place it within the scientific literature. Now that's the hard one, and a lot of that's to do with vocabulary and understanding as a scientist what the scientific community expects to see when you go and publish something. Now, I can publish a technical engineering document on what I think is going on and how to engineer something, but if you go and try and turn that into a peer-reviewed journal paper, now that's not going to work, as I found out, and it's a learning experience, is that I can wear my engineering hat, but that's not going to help me write a peer-reviewed scientific paper, right? Because right now, give me $100 million and a small team will go and try and engineer a craft based on our technical documentation. All right, that's different to saying we'll accept this journal publication based on some of the research you're doing, because the vocabulary is a little different. And I've spent time writing papers trying to link or cross-fertilize vocabulary between engineered solutions and academic rigor. So there's a whole process there involved in all this, in terms of crossing over from speculation to engineered solutions or peer-reviewed science. And I've had lots of papers rejected, too speculative, too much look like an engineering report, doesn't look like a scientific paper, and that's through you've got to be able to accept rejection, right, from your peers, okay? Because there's a small community of us trying to bridge that gap, and it's a learning curve between what you know to be true based on experience, what your evidence shows you, but also how to communicate that to the scientific community within a framework that's acceptable, even though you know that, or you think you know, you already have the solution over here, all right? But they can't see it because they're very much siloed in their area of expertise. whereas people like us around the world, the Gary Nolans or the Avi Noahs, I mean, they're molecular biologists and physicists that have their field of expertise, and sure, I do as well, but they've got to reach over as well as senior scientists, esteemed scientists and professors. They've got to reach over into other topics like I do. So you start to become a jack of all trades with an underlying specialization. And that's how you come up with these solutions, is that you have to start reaching into different topics. I've got to be a chemist, I've got to be a biologist, I've got to be a physicist, I've got to be an engineer, because the solution to all this involves all of that psychology, all right, as well. And you need to pull in people. We've recently pulled in an astrophysicist to help us get across some questions a journal had about a paper that we're close to having accepted. So we've got another co-author to bring the necessary vocabulary into that paper so it can be accepted within the scientific community. So it's not it's not an easy answer. It's a process. It involves a whole lot of different steps, and you've just got to be patient with everyone involved.
One of our members on here, Paul, is asking, what are your thoughts on time travel, including UFOs, if they're able to travel time?
Yeah, now this is time and space is really interesting, right? Because at the moment, I think there's a bit of a misconception about time or time travel, because people think of, oh, well, you go backward or you go forward in time, and that's tied to time being linear, which I think we've got wrong. And more people are saying now that the time is not linear. Time is instantaneous. The past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. Now that matches what we see with UAP. And what I think is happening now with time travel and moving out and becoming a spacefaring race, and people, for example, talk about, well, UFOs seem to be able to time travel. I think the misconception is that, say you or I jumped on a craft that can go faster than light, right? Because they've been designed and invented or back engineered, all right? And we're going to go to Alpha Centauri. Now, Alpha Centauri is 4 light years away, right? So it takes 4 years traveling at the speed of light to get there. Now, if you're sub that speed, right, going in a conventional propulsion-based craft could take centuries to get you. So that's taking time, that's linear time to cross the depths of space to get to another star system, right? So by the time you get there, hundreds of generations of your ancestors has passed on Earth, and you're never going to see them again, and you'll come back and the planet will be entirely different. Okay, so that's linear time passing. Now, these craft seem to be able to jump time, right? So instead of traveling through time, you jump across space and time. So you're changing your physical location almost instantaneously, but you're jumping time. So time is not passing much. So in other words, the craft can get to Alpha Centauri in, say, a week, right? Go and see your mate there on holiday for a week, and then jump time back to Earth, and you've only been gone 3 weeks. And you come back and you just set yourself back into your job and you carry on. So when you talk about time travel, I think there's a whole misunderstanding in the public arena, is that time travel, we're not talking about traveling back or forwards in linear time. These craft operate by jumping space and time, so that you can go to most places in even our own galaxy in a matter of days by jumping across space, and then come back, and your children are still alive and your parents are still around. So that's how I think this technology operates. Now, to understand space and time, that's why they talk about this Israeli security guy that died and said that when we understand what space is and what spacecraft are, then we will be moving off in space and meeting up with the people of the universe. And I think we're close to doing that, because we're talking about it now. Crafts that can create an engineered envelope around them that manipulates its physical environment, so that instead of pushing through it, you are shifting, translating, phasing, or jumping across physical space without moving through it, right? So you're manipulating inertia and overcoming the problems with gravity inertia doing that. And a lot of the technology stuff we write on our EnergyScapes lab page is based on how would you design and engineer these craft to do that based on the evidence we've been gathering on UAP. And also, I tend to think that some of this is already being done, and we're at a stage now where we're trying to find out a way, like through the US Senate hearings, of how to release some of this technology without people being prosecuted and put in jail for it and held to account. So I think what we're doing in terms of space and time and understanding time travel is already being well and truly researched in some of these private aerospace sectors and has been done for quite some time. So yeah, I think there's a misconception about time travel there that's starting to come out into mainstream science.
And who do you think these visitors are that we're obtaining these crafts from? And are they the same ones that are appearing in the dream? Because it seems like from the research I've done, there's many different types of visitors, and even these orbs that you were talking about earlier. There's many different types of orbs too. Some of them could be actual living things, and some of them could actually be objects that, for instance, spray gas on people and cause them to get knocked out from various reports I've heard.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so the beings and the objects. Yeah, so if you take, Eric Davis was on in one of those hearings recently that said quite emphatically that there are four main types of NHI interacting with our Earth that have been for some time. I think he said the tall whites, the greys, a couple of other ones as well. And how do you know which is which? So I think if you if you just consider me as an experience, just giving you a lived experience, and I could say, well, I've seen a tall white in my experiences with being taken, and I've seen the greys in my experiences, and I've seen what looks like augmented humans in my experiences. I think I've even seen another one that looks more like the one that was in Brazil. I think that was small, skinny, and brown. I think I've seen that one as well in my experiences with them actually coming into my room when I'm in a semi-paralyzed state and being there and interacting with me and trying to overcome the fear of those interactions has been helpful. It's still quite confronting to see something that looks like that in your personal space, and you're being restrained while all that is going on with limited movement. So so I think there's like Eric David said, there's at least three or four, and others say that seem to have been interacting with us for a long time. But I think it's evolved though too, and I mean there's also Dr. Greer talking about how we've got this alien reproduction craft and a group of people going around mimicking abduction phenomena as a way of control as well, in a physical sense. But I think there's a separation now, and there seems to be some sort of technology that's evolved throughout these legacy programs where it's now no longer necessary to remove people physically, that they can just get inside your head and do it consciously or with your consciousness. So I think, so there seems to be some sort of connection or relationship between whatever people are involved in this sort of human and a couple of other key civilizations. I don't like saying beings, entities, aliens, or well, I think we need a terminology. So other civilizations that may or may not be on this earth or have come here or have always been here, because they talk about underground or cryptoids or extraterrestrials, or so there's a bit of terminology about where they originate from as well, and also whether some of these small greys are highly engineered artificial intelligences that are just engineered biological forms to carry out tasks and monitoring and measurement. So we've got that going on. And I don't know what the governance structure between these civilizations is here, and how they decide who's doing what when they're here, and who interacts with who. That's beyond my pay grade. But there are others that seem to hint that they know that. That in terms of orbs and objects, yes, we've got the orb research we were doing in the Pilbara was looking at orbs that seem to self-assemble filmed in infrared, and we actually got some papers. We're hoping we've got some papers coming out on this that are scientific enough and have got enough data in them to be accepted, of self-assembled orbs that seem to be able to assemble themselves, orientate themselves to the environment, and overcome all the limits of the physical dimension. And we've got some imaging, quantum imaging of the internal mechanics of how all that works, and which has informed our engineered craft design as well. And that's, like I said, that's different to solid objects, right, or metallic or structured objects. Now, we do have some other data on. Now, we've got to be careful here when we publish. When we go to publish some of this, what we're doing is we're looking at the methodology and the rigor of the analytical process, and very wary of interpretation in the scientific community. So when you pitch a paper, you give them the data, the analysis, and you link it to a vocabulary to explain in what is going on, but you avoid speculation. So you don't jump to, well, here we think is an engineered structure that's coming out of this image analysis. So I've got a technical document that might say, here's a silhouette from a good set of image analysis that seems to show a polygon structure underlying what looks like an orb on the outside when we go and look at it, with valves and vents and what looks like the underside of a craft. Now, you can't dump that in a journal, right? We can put the imaging process in there and say we did X, Y, Z, and we did this image analysis, and we've got these vortices and flows and flow mechanics going on in there, which scientifically looks like optics or gravitational lensing or something like that. But you can't say, well, we think that's the underside of a structured craft. Okay, that's speculation. Prove it to us. So so some of these orbs that you think may actually be the outer plasma sheath of something that's inside it, to do with its propulsion system. All right. Now, if you can dig down into the image analysis we've done on some of these, and we have done this, and you can see that on the Energyscapes lab, there seems to be the silhouette of the underside of a solid structure, or around what at first appeared to be an orb. So yeah, we've got self-assembled ones that seem to be more, and we can separate that from piezoelectric plasma or plasma type orbs as well that are naturally occurring. All right, we can separate those from self-assembled orbs, and we've got an image sequence of an orb self-assembling in infrared, and analyze that. Okay, and that's different to another video sequence where we've taken or broken down in imaging what at first appeared to be an orb on the horizon, and said, well, no, that it seems to be that there's some sort of structure associated with that when you get through all the the luminescence that hides all that in visually. So that's kind of a broad explanation of types of entities, and then types of orbs versus structured craft. Now, I think they're all using the same science. So I think there's a science to this that's been taken offline for a long, long time through legacy programs, and we've been led down blind alleys because once you understand the science, I think there's a common, what I call a domain, a common domain or science to whether they're self-assembled orbs, structured craft. There seems to be some sort of boundary that they're interacting with that shifts space and time and enables all these things to do what they're doing, whether it's self-assembled or craft, or even the interaction with consciousness in space and time there, and the technology to do that. I think there's an underlying field of science here that is slowly coming out and being released to do with all of this.
Do you think someone's asking on here because Trump tried to backtrack on disclosure a couple of times? Some people still think he will disclose, but because it's worldwide, no government is really talking about it. Do you think it's actually the entities saying, "Hey, we don't want to be disclosed"? And that might be the reason, because the governments of the world don't really agree on everything else. So it would seem weird that they would all have the exact same policy to overall keep this pretty quiet. I know we're having some meetings here and there, and it's getting better, but overall it seems to be pretty well covered up.
Yeah, I think, and like you said, I think a lot of that's to do with technology. And there seems to be, I mean, there is very highly regarded people talking about the historical circumstances of interaction with non-human intelligence or civilizations back to Truman, and in the 50s, and meetings with some of these beings or civilizations, and deciding on the way in which they were going to cooperate. And because one story is that there were two races that visited, the US government, for example, back in the 50s or whenever it was, and gave them two choices. I can't remember who was disclosing that story, but it's been around for a long, long time. Was it Nellis Air Force Base or somewhere like that? And they said, well, look, you can give you got two options. You can go with these guys from off planet, and you can develop and keep technology to yourself and develop weapons, or you can go with these guys from this civilization who want to gift that technology to all of humanity to uplift the whole planet. So, and obviously we went down the private sector weaponization path, and so there's that story hanging around too. Now, in terms of disclosure and Trump, it's yes, he has. I mean, he's said there's something going on there, and he wants to look into it. And his his executive branch is in Tulsi and others and Burchett and that are all well into this, and quite frustrated with people holding back or holding off, and even the NDAA trying to push that through with the what was called eminent domain issue at the moment, that if anyone has got the stuff, it's to be handed over to the US government for oversight. So whether it's all going to come out, I think in one form or another it is going to. How much Trump gets on board that, because once you say publicly that this has been going on, and yes, we've been interacting with civilizations from elsewhere for a long, long time. It's a difficult one, because they used to say, well, no, the world's going to panic, and one of the reasons that it's been kept very quiet for a long, long time is because it's going to upset religion, it's going to upset scientists, it's going to upset civilization, it's going to ruin the careers of people that have been following, their field of physics for 30 years. And it's like we're at a stage now where I think we're more accepting of the fact that even through antiquity, something's been going on with planet Earth for a long, long time, on and off, and it's all been taken offline. So in terms of, as Trump said, I think people are going to understand, people are looking for catastrophic disclosure. And I mean, and Stephen Greer talks about that as well, that the craft's going to turn up on the White House lawn, and the beings are going to pop out and shake hands. It's versus disclosure's already happened. It's a process, and it's been going on, I don't know, for quite a few years, and just gathering momentum. Think about the likes. I mean, I'm sure I wouldn't have been able to do this 10 years ago. I would have been shut down. I mean, publishing a document on Energyscape's lab about how to build a spacecraft that can go faster than the speed of light. It's I think we would have been deleted. So it's disclosure is a process, and I think it's a very carefully orchestrated and managed process. Even the likes of me, the people involved with me, some people know, some people don't know, and I can't say some of the people that I'm involved with. So, being reached out to by some of these organizations and people, that's disclosure, all right? people around the world, Gary Nolan, Ivy Lowe, but we've got historically others like Stephen Greer that have always been there. But as this infiltrates or permeates through mainstream science, that's disclosure. As we publish in peer-reviewed journals, that's disclosure. As we start talking about publicly and accepting publicly that there are other civilizations out there, and always has been, that's disclosure. All right, it's preparation. We're preparing humanity to understand and accept, without crashing economies, without causing chaos and panic, that we're not alone in the universe. You can still be Christian, you can still be Muslim. Go back and look at your texts, go back to the original translations of the Hebrew Bible. Yes, well, they're already in there. The Nephilim, the giants, the sons of God married the daughters of men. There's a lot of stuff already in religious doctrine that people like Paul Anthony Wallace are pointing to. Look, we've always known about this. The storytelling has just been reinterpreted into religious texts, and if you separate it out, it's always been there. So this is a process of education. I see disclosure as more of an education problem now than it ever has been. Yes, we've got technology, we've got protection of weapons development, we've got protection of spacecraft design, but that should not stop the everyday person from saying, I'm going to Mars for 2 weeks for a holiday, I'm going to see my mate at Alpha Centauri who shifted over there to work in a water mine or a mine over on another planet that they're colonizing. It's that's where the general population should be brought into all of this and be participating on it. But it's preparation, because it's been quite disorientating for a person to think that there are other civilizations out there. We can interact with them. We can go to another planet. We can live on it. We can set up a society there, and we can jump around space and time and not have to miss hundreds of years and not ever see our kids again. So disclosure is already happening, and it's been going on, and it's been planned quite nicely and quite well, I think. And every time this NDAA gets rejected the third time round, I think that's all part of it as well. So now the public needs another year. We're not quite there. We'll give the public another year of people like Gary and Andrew and Tim Gallaudet and others. Yet we'll give them more time to hold the hand of the public and do some more work and publish some more stuff. Let's look at disclosing some more stuff now. Are we ready yet? Oh, no, let's give them another year. Let's let them do some more work and release some more information into mainstream science and society. So people need to understand this is all on purpose. It's all going on. We're all part of it. I mean, who knows what people talk about, the likes of us now that have a high public profile around the world. But I think it's all part of a carefully planned narrative, if you ask me.
How is it over in Australia? Because I'm living in the US now. People are very open to the UFO thing, but I'm from Canada, where it seems there might be 15% that you could talk to about it, but overall they're still pretty close-minded. How are people, as far as being receptive to it over in Australia?
Yeah, I test those boundaries all the time, and it's a lot of people still aren't ready to talk about it openly. I've tested it in various situations. I need to keep my job separate from my day job, separate from what I do outside of it, even though in my day job, a lot of people in positions of authority are well aware of my high public profile. But I've got to be very, very careful, because I've got to meet the mandate of my government employee, because I'm a government department employee. So in terms of education and hand-holding, I think it's still early days. At high levels, I can have a certain level of conversation with decision makers about all of this, because I find it increasingly interesting that there's something to it all. In the lower tiers down with colleagues, I might drop a few test questions, and that if the subject comes up, I don't bring it up myself, but if it comes up, I'll drop a few lines, see where it's at. If they become aware of me online, because people love to search up people, don't they? Usually that changes their mindset and their perception of me. Once they find me online, that's some of them can be a bit shocked. Some of them are curious. Some of them think you're absolutely crazy. So I think it's still very early days. Most of over here, I would say, there are a lot of people that find it interesting but are still too afraid to talk about it. If I start talking about it too much, they'll switch off and walk away, is probably where we're still at, around socially or professionally. So that's why I'm very careful to tackle this scientifically, all right? And say, okay, have you read my peer-reviewed science papers? Have you read my published books? Have you actually read anything of what I've done before making a judgment or a decision on who you think I am? And usually the answer is no. And I said, well, I'm not even going to discuss this. I'm not going to have this conversation if you're not going to actually bother to look at who I work with and what we publish, all right? So there's a lot of people have an opinion, all right? But they don't want to bother to go and actually investigate and research and understand. And that opinion's based on perception, and perception's based on programming and what they think reality is, like you said. So we've still got a lot of the population that needs an education in all this. And again, if people are heavily religious, they have a problem with it, because there's a big separation between in Christianity, for example, between evangelical church out in suburbia versus, say, the head of the church in the Church of England in the UK or the Vatican, right? Go to a Catholic church out in suburbia, and then their perception of what you're talking about is still different to what the Vatican Observatory is saying, all right? So they haven't even connected up their own congregation to this yet and had those conversations. So the church over here in suburbia is going to say demonic. The Vatican Observatory is going to say extraterrestrial being, one of the children of God. All right, so we still haven't bridged that gap either. So there is a lot of work to do, and a lot of this is education and preparation, and that's why I think this is a carefully planned process, bringing in people the likes of us, you, podcasts, people involved, educating the public, getting it widespread enough so that it's a progression that accelerates and gets faster and faster and faster as more and more people become open to it. So yeah, we're probably very similar over here to what you're saying over there at the moment. There's an awareness developing, but there's a lot of confusion, a lot of fear, and that's what we don't want. If too much of the population has a fear-based reaction, then we perpetuate violence onto another race or another civilization that's not human as well, instead of shaking hands and saying, hi, how's it going? You know what I mean?
And I agree with your point. For me, if I'm researching it 3 or 4 hours a day, them with no research at all, they'll know more than me. I'm just an idiot wasting my time researching it, but they're not going to research it at all to know if I'm really an idiot or not. So yeah, you're right. You just got to shake that off. One last question here, because I know you've been gracious with your time, but Paul wants to know your thoughts on Egypt and the pyramids and alien transcripts through your research. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, because I read a lot about antiquity. It's because I don't publish on it, but obviously I've watched Ancient Aliens and a lot of the other paleo archaeology sort of stuff going on with the pyramids, and a lot of physical evidence coming out now that the pyramids predate Egyptian civilization, and that the pyramids aren't burial chambers. There's some books coming out now that talk about that fraud as well, because of water erosion on the pyramids. That the markings in the coffin chamber are a fraud, and that no one was actually buried in there, and that they're actually part of an energy structure to do with ley lines and grid lines around the earth, because pyramids are all around the earth as well. So I think, yes, in terms of antiquity, that the Egyptian civilization was a precursor to or came after whoever was there before, and then they came in and occupied that space, and may have been helped to some degree if you look at their hieroglyphics, and you look at the Sumerian culture and the Persian culture, and some of the symbology and some of those hieroglyphics too, to do with technologies that don't look like they could have been possible. Even the engineering and the alignment with celestial phenomena is beyond what the civilization should have known. If you talk about the hunter-gatherer process of the evolution of humans, all right, the knowledge has been injected, and there seems to be some very strong evidence for that now, and that the whole narrative about how we developed in a linear way in terms of knowledge and understanding is a rort and a fraud perpetuated on us by a small group of anthropologists and archaeologists. So, and they're still fighting about that, and they'll rigorously defend that. But the evidence seems to be overwhelming now that this linear progression is just simply not true, and that we've come through cycles over tens of thousands of years of becoming highly developed, having non-human intelligence involved with that, collapsing, whether it's war amongst other intelligences or war amongst ourselves or a combination of both, and natural disasters, and had global resets and had to start again. And it just so happens that this time around, whoever else was around to step back behind the scenes and just let things evolve the way they have. So you go to South America, you go to Mexico, you go to China. China's locked up a lot of their pyramid structures. They do have pyramids there. I've read some books on all that as well. You go to the Grand Canyon, the evidence in there, or people are talking about why some of the Grand Canyon's closed, because they're talking about Egyptian artifacts being in some parts of the Grand Canyon. You're not allowed to go there. So I think there was a globally present civilization well before our current state, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, that's collapsed. And they talk about Tartaria as well, and the world wars and the destruction of historical buildings and this whole free energy grid and bells and resonance that they talk about. So I think the underlying science across all of this is what they're trying to hide, because once you get that science, you can build these crafts, you can engineer reality, you can cross space and time, you can heal your cells. You don't have disease anymore. You don't need the pharmaceutical industry. You don't need the fossil fuel industry. There's a big backstory to all of this that goes right back to ancient times and biblical texts and narratives, because the Christian culture is influenced by ancient Egypt and Persian culture and Sumerian texts in terms of Genesis stories as well. The Old Testament's got a Sumerian Akkadian cuneiform tablet origin to it as well. So, but a lot of, exactly what you just said, a lot of people aren't educated to know this. They believe what they're told at the surface, and they don't peel back the layers to understand the deeper meaning of all of this. So yeah, we can leave it at that, I think.
Yes, very good explanation, and I've put it up a couple times, your website and your YouTube channel on the screen, and I appreciate all the information. It looks like, thank God, the Wi-Fi improved after the first 5 minutes, but maybe we can do this again sometime, and hopefully the Wi-Fi will be better, but I'll let you close this off with whatever message you want to tell to the fans. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my closing message, thanks for having me. It's been brilliant to spread the word and get out there. I've been on a few podcasts now and sort of getting well known about all this. But my message to the fans is just educate yourself. Don't believe what other people tell you. If you've got a lived experience, read about it, see what other people's lived experiences. If you're into the science of it, if you want to get past conspiracy theories or angels and demons, whatever your gig is you must overcome your trained or programmed reaction to all this, and actually start to read and listen to other people and educate yourself. Just do not believe what people are telling you. You need get a whole lot of different views across a broad spectrum, from physics or science to religion to governance structures to the aerospace people to personalities that are out there talking about all this, and listen to the hearings and read the books and look at papers. You've got to educate yourself. That's my closing message, is don't just listen to what everyone's saying. Actually do your own work, and you'll quickly realize that there's something to all this. and it'll change your world. It'll change your mind. You'll see reality in a totally new way. So thank you very much.